Hi, and welcome to Mark's Motivational Podcast for another Authors Tuesday. This is going to come live to you next Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. So today I'm delighted to be joined by another author, Grace Tierney. She's an author of a great book. I can't wait to read it myself. It's called Words the Vikings Gave Us. So you're very welcome along today, Grace.
Thanks very much for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you. And I hope your book's doing really well for you, first of all, before we start.
Yeah, it's going fairly well. I wasn't really sure if people would be as interested in Vikings as I was, but it
Yeah.
turns out some people like it.
Great stuff. So you might just tell the listeners a little bit of background about yourself and your writing as well, the books you've written, please.
Yeah, well, I suppose in a way I'm always been writing. So I was thinking
Yeah,
about when I started, and
yeah.
I tried my first novel when I was only 15. It's brutal and will never see the light of day. So that one I'm going to spare the world. But I've always kind of written part time in whatever free
Mm,
time I could get.
yeah.
And around about 2008, when I first started having kids and starting a family, I ended up staying home to look after them and decided, no, I'm gonna go for the writing now and do more of it and try and really push it and get more of it published. So
Mm,
one of the first things I did was start a blog, because at the time they were terrible trendy. It's all
mm.
podcasts now, of course, like yourself. But
Yeah.
I didn't want to write about writing. I felt everybody that was writing blogs that
Mm,
was an author was going, oh, I'll do tips and tricks. And I thought, I'm going to run out of things to say.
yeah.
So I thought about what I liked and what I was interested in. And one of the
Mm,
things I really like is etymology, which is the study of the history of words. So it's everything from, did it come from Latin through to French into English, that kind of history, but
mm,
also how its spelling changed, how it's been used in history, the people behind the stories of the words in history. And I would take a different word every week. The more unusual, the better. Although I
mm,
occasionally cover an ordinary one, and try and research that up, find the histories behind it, and keep it as light-hearted as possible. So that's why my blog is called Word Foolery. So I'm basically fooling with words, and that's what I do
mm,
every week. And the books kind of grew very organically from that, because
yeah.
I built up a bit of a readership. People were giving me suggestions and ideas. And my first one was actually about eponyms, because I started to do a series on the blog about people whose names got into the dictionary. So the one that you learn in primary school here is about boycott. So
Mm,
we boycott goods or whatever to make a political statement, but he was a real person and there is a history behind him. So I kind of went from that one, gathered a few of them on the blog, and went, I might just possibly have a book in this if I gathered all together. Now,
mm,
obviously, there was a lot more to it as I
yeah.
discovered. And self-publishing, as you may discover yourself over time, it takes a good bit of work,
Hmm.
but you do have total creative control, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And you can take your time. If you're doing it part-time, you can just chip away at it, and one day you'll look and go, oh my god, I've actually written a book. I'm gonna have to let people read this thing now.
Mm,
And it's really grown from there. So at this stage, I now have three of them. The Viking one is the most recent, which came out in kind of September time. Was supposed to be out in July, but came out in September. These
yeah.
things
Looks
happen.
great. Looks great.
And I'm really pleased with how they're going, and I'm currently writing the next one, which is all
Brilliant.
about words related to Christmas time, which is all very
Mm,
seasonal at the minute. Kind of
yeah.
nice to
Yeah.
write it at the
Brilliant.
right
Yeah.
time of year for once.
Yeah.
And I've just honestly, I've just really enjoyed doing it. I mean, it's a there's plenty of work, there's plenty of hours that have to be put into it, but it's
Mm,
wonderful when you hear back from readers that they're enjoying it.
mm.
I know, for example, that the one about the maritime words and phrases, somebody bought that and sent it to their brother in Bermuda, and another person gave it to their great uncle, I think, who had been in the Merchant Navy and is now 96. So I know a
Wow.
96-year-old is reading my stories, and it's such a buzz to know
That's
that.
great. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, yeah. No, thanks a lot for sharing it. That sounds really good. Your blog sounds brilliant as well, because I think you've shared some of your links. I'm going to put them on the show notes for people to check out as well. Great. So that's great. So you mentioned there, like, you've always written. So so when did it start for you? Since you were in school, was it Grace, or have you always
Yeah, I think
mm,
like a lot of writers, I got into it
mm,
because I love reading books. and
Yeah.
you start going, hey, I could do this. I could make those
Hmm.
stories. And
Yeah.
was it Douglas Adams used to call it? He wanted to be a writer because it was indoor work with no heavy lifting. Yeah, I can get
Great.
behind that idea.
Yeah, yeah, great stuff. Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, no, that's great. And just like in your experience over the last couple of years, I suppose, especially through COVID, have you ever kind of hit a kind of a metaphorical wall, like, or got a kind of block? And how have you dealt with that for anybody who's listening, that you might be able to help with your the way you've dealt with it yourself?
Well, I think COVID's been hard times for everybody. I've
Yeah,
been lucky that
yeah.
I haven't been unwell, thank God.
Thank God. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but in a way, it didn't change my writing life that much because the one
Mm,
thing about writing is you don't really go outside.
true.
And so
Yeah.
long as I can connect to the internet, I can do the vast majority of my research. Now, I
Mm,
was a bit disappointed that some of the libraries were shut because that's
yeah,
useful for reference work for me. But
yeah.
I was able to keep chipping away. I mean, I launched one of the books virtually,
Great.
right in the middle of it when we were all on
Mm,
horrible lockdown, and people were
yeah.
very receptive to that and very understanding of the fact that we couldn't do anything physically
Mm,
in person. Um, but in terms of hitting blocks and I suppose I'd have to be honest and say I don't think I've ever really suffered from writer's block because
mm,
I always write lots of different things. So although the books are the core thing, every Monday I have to have a blog out. And yes, sometimes it'll be 5 to midnight because it's taken me a while to get the time in the day or the
mm.
idea or whatever.
I hear you.
But I'm quite driven by that deadline. I do a small column for my local paper, the Meath Coaster. I live up on the East Meath Coast,
Brilliant.
and knowing that I have to have that to Dermot, that he needs to have it by the print deadline, is very motivating. But
Mm,
having said that, I think what I do tend to do if I do get a bit stuck or disheartened with it, I suppose more than necessarily fully stuck, is I rely on other people. So the feedback from the blog readers is great. I'm very lucky to be part of a small writers group, which
great.
originally started in Balbriggan Library, but we kind of moved off and do our own thing. We just rotated between the houses now. And
Great.
the
Yeah.
cake always helps, and the chat and the
Mm,
banter, and knowing that somebody will understand when you say that you're a bit down because you've got a bad rejection or a bad review or
mm,
whatever.
yeah.
So I think relying on that really helped. And I think I mentioned to you that I do a bit of mentoring of writers in Nanowrimo. So that's the National Novel Writing Challenge. Comes up every
Mm,
November, so I'm in the thick of it at the minute. And actually, although I'm the one meant to be mentoring and organising events and write-ins and things like that with them, honestly I get such a buzz and so much support from the writers that I work with, because it's
great.
everybody from somebody that's never written before and they're 16, they're on TY and they decide they want to write a novel, to somebody who's maybe they've retired from work and they've always wanted to write and they're getting into it. And just hearing their stories and like the little tips and tricks and
Mm,
the enthusiasm for words and story and plot and how am I going to fix this problem, and this character keeps changing names, or I've got an
yeah.
enormous plot hole, how will I fix it? And that sort of collaborative sort of sense of writing together. Now it's only once a year, so it's in November, but it's
Mm,
great to feel that around the world everybody's writing, everybody's
yeah.
trying, and we're all slogging away. And what we're writing could be good or could be awful, but we're doing it. And I
Hmm.
think that energy feeds me for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's great, Grace. Because I can't agree with you more. Like the writers groups are really helpful, aren't they? Like
Yeah.
for like, because I do one every Saturday, and like you write off a prompt, which is really really good as well. So yeah, so that's brilliant. So like touching on what you said there about doing the launch online, how did that work out for you? That must have been different. Like I haven't heard that before. Yeah,
Yeah, well, actually, I think quite a few people have moved to that because of the pandemic. I
yeah,
suspect the traditional
yeah,
publishers will go back to their traditional wine and cheese
mm,
type outing.
yeah,
I think from the perspective of a self-publisher or an indie publisher,
mm,
it makes perfect sense because you
yeah,
do need to keep your costs down if you want to try and break even on the book. You
yeah,
don't have a massive marketing budget, and as I often say, I basically have a zero marketing budget. I do the vast majority
yeah.
talking to other people, talking to people like yourselves on various podcasts, being active on social media, anything
Mm,
I can think of, I'll give it a go. And I'm a bit of a nerd. I quite like the stats. So I'll watch exactly, did that actually help me have any sales? And if it did, I'll do it again. And if it didn't, it's kind
mm,
of like, okay, that didn't work. What can I try next?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
So from the point of view of doing the launch, basically I used the social media and the blog that I already had. Did a certain amount of a countdown in the run up to the day in terms of releasing little extracts.
Mm.
Tried to organize as many people as I could to write, could you please buy it on the day? Because that gives you a big bump to your Amazon rankings.
Yeah.
Although not everybody does, and that's fine. Trying to get book reviewers involved or interested in reading self-published nonfiction can be a bit tricky. There's more book reviewers out there doing fiction, which is great because you should review what you like to read. That
Hmm.
makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
But getting advanced reviews is quite tricky, I found. Um,
Mm.
and then it was literally just, doing loads of posts and running polls, running a little competition, just trying to
Mm.
get some interaction from people on the day.
Yeah.
Worked out pretty well, I'd have to say.
Brilliant.
I
Yeah.
did get a great laugh when I did the virtual launch for the Viking one. I posted a small extract about mead because it's a Viking invention and a Viking word
Brilliant.
from Old
Yeah.
Norse. So I just did that extract from the book towards the end of the day and kind of went, well, I actually don't have any mead because I don't like it. It sounds really bad to say I don't like mead and I'm writing about Vikings, but I don't. Lots of people do. And I
Yeah.
was saying, oh, but I'll go and have a glass of wine because it's the end of the day now. But, I'm not paying for everybody else's drinks. You're going to have to go and get your own drinks. But it was
Yeah.
actually really sweet because a few of the people that were following along during the day, some of them had like Viking horns, the
All
drinking
right.
horns from,
Great.
they'd
Yeah.
obviously been to Scandinavia and bought one or whatever. And they all started posting pictures of themselves doing a cheers at the end of the day, which was
Oh,
lovely,
great.
so you can reach out to people. And the reach is fantastic because you're talking to people all around the world. Like, you
Hmm.
can only hand your book to people that you meet in person, but you can connect with people internationally, which I think is fantastic.
Oh, it is brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. So that sounded really good. Like, that's thanks a lot for sharing that with everybody. Like, because and it could be somebody at home that's written a book and not able to do a launch at the moment. So that's brilliant, Grace. Thanks very much for that. Thank you. So, like, can I just ask you, like, do you kind of fit your writing into a schedule yourself? Do you kind of have a daily schedule where you write a certain amount of words a day, or what way do you work it yourself?
It varies depending on the time of year. So that
Okay.
my November schedule is basically insane because I'm
Yeah.
trying to write 50,000 words in 1 month.
Mm.
And just to clarify, that is possible. I know it's not for everybody. If you're
Mm.
if you're writing a poetry book, you can't just churn that out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is possible, and I do that every November. So at the minute, it's pretty much 2 to 3 hours of solid writing every single day.
God.
I'd
Yeah.
already done 3 hours today and got my 2,000 words in, and
Mm.
you'd have to be pretty determined, which is the polite
Mhm.
way of saying I'm very stubborn. And you do
Yeah.
have to be a bit organized, and you have to
Mm.
schedule your writing time in advance, and you
Mm.
need everybody to know that you're not available. So all of my friends and my family at this stage know that there is no point trying to get my attention or to do anything social with me during November because I'm just going to go, but I'm writing a book, and get really
Yeah.
stressed and probably
Yeah.
cry at them. So they're kind of like, no, we just leave her alone. We'll
Leave
talk
her
to her in
alone.
December.
Yeah.
Now, to be
Yeah.
honest, that's the kind of the insane version of my schedule. Um, on more normal months, which is the rest of the year, it's pretty much I will try and get my writing hours in while my kids are at school, because that's the
Yeah.
simplest way of doing it.
Mm.
Yes, sometimes there's overspill if you have a whole load of deadlines to meet or whatever. And luckily, mine are now teenagers, so they're much more independent and
Mm.
understanding of that. Although they do like to complain because,
Yeah.
that's what else do you do when you're a teenager? Oh, we're so
Exactly.
neglected. Which is fair enough, I guess. I put them in the dedication to try and buy them off, but they're not really bothered about being in the dedication.
Yeah.
um, and I try not to slag them too much in any of my writing. I've kind of promised not to identify them too badly.
Yeah.
But what I will do is I kind of schedule things during the month. So, like I said, I do the blog every Monday, and that's sacrosanct. And Wednesdays, I have a serialized comedy fiction novel on a reading platform called Chinillo. So the idea is that readers subscribe for quite a reasonable fee per month, and they can read anything they want off of the site. So that could be, nonfiction recipe books, it could be poetry, it could be sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. And then if readers have subscribed to your story, you get a portion of what they paid for that month. And then the site itself obviously takes a bit for the overhead. So every
Mm.
month you get a small amount in, and when it mounts up to $50, you cash out and you get your money for it. But it's great because I actually quite like doing serialized fiction. I've always been a big Charles Dickens fan, and that's how he wrote all of his novels. So
Wow.
I'm not at Charles Dickens level, I might
Mm.
add, but it's quite
Good.
enjoyable to keep a
Mm.
story going long term, to run it for, weekly episodes. I
Mm.
suppose, God, maybe it's like writing a soap opera, I don't know. But
Yeah.
you're keeping it going and introducing new characters and having very long story arcs.
Mm.
But the readers get to know the characters. So anyway, I will do a big batch of those in advance, but then every Wednesday I'll edit one up and release it and promote it. So I kind of have a structure during the week, and that keeps me on track. And then other than that, it's like I'll have a big project like the book, and all the other hours will get sucked into whatever
Mm.
the big project is.
Yes, that sounds great. Like that sounds really interesting what you've said there about the thing your the different types of books that are like that sounds really good. Like if you want to share that as well, I can put on the show notes for people to check out as well. Like, you know.
Yeah, sure, I will
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
I must say
yeah.
I do enjoy writing it, and
Mm.
it's very light-hearted. It's not,
Yeah.
obviously. Actually, in fairness, the history books are fairly light-hearted too, because that,
Mm.
as I said, the word foolery thing. Because I don't think history has to be boring. I think it should be
No.
fun. It
Mm.
should identify, so that you're sitting there going, God, that could have happened to me. They're just people that happen to have lived in the past, but they
Yeah.
have their ups and downs in the same way. They have their big egos or their ridiculous failures, and they can be quite entertaining. And there's
Yeah.
nothing dry about history if you write it in an entertaining way
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
reader.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's
Yeah.
what I aim for.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, Grace, would you like to maybe just give a quick explanation of your latest book, just for people that are going to buy it, just a little what it's about, like for people to get a bit of a takeaway for people that are going to buy your book. That'd be great if you don't
Abs-
mind.
Absolutely. So I don't know why I took the notion of Vikings,
Yeah.
except
Yeah.
I do quite like Vikings, and the
Mm.
previous one had been about nautical topics. So I think in researching it, I realised just how influential Old Norse, which was the language of the Vikings, was
Mm.
on the beginning of the English language. Because, as you know, the Vikings were all around kind of eight
Hmm.
hundred up to about 1100. But I hadn't really realised just how influential they were on the English language. So nowadays, there's probably about 600 Old Norse words that are in fairly common use in English now. Now, I cover about 300 of them in the book because, to be honest, if I read up on a word and discover that the story just isn't that interesting, I simply won't include it. Okay,
Yeah.
and I did throw in a few modern ones. So I have a modern Vikings chapter which covers things like the Kindle, the reading device. That's
Mm.
actually from Sindal in Old Norse. And although it's a modern device and it was named in modern times, it deliberately taken from the idea of the Old Norse candle and lighting with information and the light in your brain kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, so I have IKEA and Lego and all that kind of stuff in the modern
Great.
one, but most of
Yeah.
it is the old things. Um, and it was fascinating because actually a huge number of ordinary, everyday, basic words. So if we didn't have Viking influence in English, you wouldn't have the word thing or
Mm.
they or them or sky or egg, and like really basic words. Because
Mm.
what happened was you had Anglo-Saxon would have a word, so a egg was egg in Anglo-Saxon, but then the Vikings arrived, and basically the Anglo-Saxons went, that's an easier word to say, or that's a more common word, or we like it better, or whatever. And over time, the Viking word just completely replaced the Anglo-Saxon word and became the new early English word and has stuck with us all that time. Some of them
Mm.
came along later, so things like saga and Ragnarok and Yule came slightly later when historians actually started investigating these things and reading the Icelandic sagas. So they came, maybe the 1200s or 1300s on at that stage, but they acquired the Viking words. So what I do is I go through all of the words, find all the stories. Loved researching things like Bluetooth, for example, that we all have in our phones. if
Yeah.
you actually look at your smartphone, there's a little symbol for Bluetooth, and that is in fact a Norse rune, and it's the
Wow.
initials of a Viking king who was called Bluetooth because he had a rotten black tooth in his mouth. And there's loads of history about the things he did. He was horrendous. He killed his sister, buried her in a bog, but then she'd been rebelling against him. So you get all this background stuff about these
Very
Vikings and what
good.
they were getting up to. Um, and a whole load of political words are from the Vikings as well. So they gave us ombudsman. They have the oldest parliament in the world is in Iceland.
Mm.
Law and bylaw are all Viking words, which just wasn't what I expected, which is where I get excited is when it's not what we think it's
Yeah.
going to be. You think it's going to be ransacking and pillaging and all this kind of stuff. And yet I had enough words to have a chapter about politics or one about Norse romance because we get honeymoon and husband and all sorts of love. A kiss and hug are Viking words. So
Yeah.
I like discovering those unusual things and bringing those together into particular chapters. So basically, I cover any kind of topic, gather it all together into chapters, and then give it a start and an end. Plenty of references for those that want to read up more, and discover the history of basically how Old Norse has changed the language that we use every single day.
That sounds brilliant, Grace. Brilliant. I'm looking forward to reading that myself. Yeah, that sounds really good.
Good. Well,
Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
you enjoy it genuinely.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. And who would you, that'd be great for all the listeners to get a kind of a bit of a feel for it as well before they buy it. So thanks a lot for sharing that with us. That's brilliant. And
I know I rambled on a bit,
no,
but you get
no,
me
it's,
starting talking about words and you
yeah.
can't stop me.
Oh no, that's great because I didn't know that like myself today. Some of them words. So that's brilliant. And who would you say are your main influences, writers yourself? Like, who was your favorite kind of authors that I know you probably have a lot, but for one you're reading at the moment, even like, yeah,
Yeah, I do. I read
yeah,
an awful lot,
yeah, mm,
and I love that, and that makes my life all the better. And I
mm,
do tend to read a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. And I know I should say that my favorite author is some historical writer, but unfortunately, it's not.
yeah,
Um, I think probably my favorite book when I was growing up was definitely The Hobbit by Tolkien, which does
mm,
have Icelandic influences because he borrowed a whole load of stuff for Lord of the Rings from the Icelandic sagas because he had a nanny
wow,
who was from Iceland. Um,
yeah,
but it got me started on fantasy. And to be honest, it's really well structured. It makes me cry every time I read it. So it's got the emotional punch, lots of action, and lots of what happens next. So
mm,
although literary fiction is fantastic, I have to say I am nearly always drawn to something that keeps me turning the page. And that can be any genre. I love thrillers, still very faithful to fantasy. But to be honest, thinking about it, I reckon there's a lot of humor in a lot of what I would read. So I love the fact I know I said I love Charles Dickens and I always have done. And part of what drew me to that was because he's actually very funny.
hmm,
He rails against terrible things in society and he has murders and all sorts of dreadful things happen,
yeah,
but he's very witty with his character names. So I
mm,
love, regardless of what the genre is, if it has a little light touch, it has a bit of humor that kind of, even if it's quite dark humor, I think you have to have just that little moment that makes you smile or laugh out loud on the train. I've
yeah,
done that on
yeah,
the train north to me and literally tears running down my eyes from reading Christopher Brookmyre.
mm,
Um, he writes fantastic, very very dark humor, kind of mixed with a thriller. He's a Scottish writer and he's hilarious. But
mm.
anybody that can make me laugh will make me keep reading, basically.
Great stuff. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. Like, what I like about this podcast, you get some great tips of different books and all that, and different authors. So thank you for that, Grace. Brilliant. And music yourself. Do you have a favorite type of music? Even do you kind of listen to music when you write yourself? Have you done that?
I know you do, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of amazed that you can do that because I cannot do that at all.
No. No.
No, I prefer to have silence, or I mean, I don't mind if there's white noise of people chatting around me, say
Yeah.
working in the library or whatever is fine, even a noisy library. But no, I tend not to listen to music when I'm writing. I do like music. I think probably the only ones I'm not into would be kind of very heavy metal or country.
Mm.
Wouldn't really light my fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know who I love actually is Marty in the morning on Lyric FM. He plays a great mixture of all sorts of
I
music and
heard
he's
that
got a great bit
before.
of
Yeah.
banter going on. And
Mm.
I go for a walk in the morning before I start working, most mornings, and I listen to him and he puts a smile on my face at the beginning of the day and it kind of sets the tone. So
Great stuff. Yeah, great stuff. And movies as well. Do you have a favorite movie yourself?
yeah, I do. I love the cinema. Always have done. Love French
Mm,
films, and
yeah.
again, a bit like the reading, I'll kind of watch anything.
Mm.
Horror kind of scares me a bit too much. I'm a bit too much of a chicken for that. But
Yeah.
and I wish I could. My daughter loves horror movies, and she's
Yeah,
very
like
disappointed
my
when I
son
try
as
to watch
well.
them.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I quite like The Princess Bride. I know that's a bit of a throwback to like 80s, 90s time, but my God, I can probably quote the entire script at this stage because I've watched it
Mm,
too many times. But
yeah.
it's got a bit of swashbuckling, sword fighting, and princesses and drama, and lots of what happens next, and twists and turns. And once you've got that, I'm in.
Yeah, I've got a lot of films like that. I can kind of watch so much I can nearly tell you the whole the whole story, you know.
I know, but
That's great.
there is a
Yeah,
comfort. You know you're going to enjoy it, and you can just settle down and chill out.
yeah, definitely agree with you, yeah. And would you hope like to kind of have your book used in a film, or like would that be kind of something you'd be interested in yourself? Have you ever thought about that yourself?
That would be amazing.
Mm,
Well, I suppose with the nonfiction, they could only use it as reference.
yeah, I suppose, yeah, yeah.
And and what I did find in doing the Viking one was just how good some of the research is that they put into the program. So I don't know if you ever watched the Vikings program that's filmed down in like Lockdown and
I
Wicklow
never
and
got
all
to
that.
see it. I heard it's brilliant. I heard it's
It
brilliant,
is
yeah.
honestly, it's brilliant. I really enjoyed watching it before I ever wrote the book. What when I
Mm,
started writing it, I started realizing that tons of the stuff is just perfectly researched, from what they're
mm,
wearing to what they're eating to what's going on in the world. Loads. I mean, it is fiction, but it's
yeah.
based on so much fact. And some of the things that you think, well, that's a bit outrageous. That obviously never happened. If you read up on it, it turns out it
It
did
actually did.
happen. So it's
Yeah, yeah.
quite surprising, really.
Mm, yeah.
But yeah, a movie, yeah, that would be great. It would have to be for some of the fictional things.
Mm,
And I know a few writers that like to, on their Instagram or whatever, they'll put up pictures of famous actors and go, well, if I was casting my book, this is who would play the lead or whatever.
mm.
I've never gone that far, but it's a tempting thought, isn't it?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I really enjoyed talking to you on the podcast today, Grace. It's been great. Like talking about your writing and your book, your new book. I hope it's a big success for you, you know. So one more thing before you go, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Just for anybody who's listening, what kind of motivates you? And could you give anybody a bit of advice to kind of keep themselves motivated in their writing, because it's a motivational podcast. Yeah,
Indeed. I had a
yeah,
feeling you might ask me for something motivational, which is a bit of a head scratcher.
yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
no, no, you're absolutely right. And I do think it's a good idea to have something motivational out there to listen to and keep you
Mm,
going.
yeah.
Um, I think I would give two pieces of advice. So, one would be if you're interested in writing novels and you want to try something new, give NaNoWriMo a try. So, that's NaNoWrimo.org. And basically, you register, they'll point you at your local region, and you go from there. Now, it's possibly too late to start this year because we're already halfway through the month, but bear it in mind for future years because there's a lot of support both locally and online. They get pep talks from major authors, so Neil Gaiman, Diana Gabaldon. I think they got James Patterson. Like, they get really big best-selling authors to give hints and tips, which would probably be better than any I could come up with.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have to do a bit of sort of motivation, I suppose, encouragement, I would call it, to the writers in my region. And honestly, the best advice is just write. Don't
Mm,
delay. Don't think I'll do it when I'll retire or I'll do it when I have more time,
yeah.
because you're never going to have more time. You have to make time for what you're
Mm-hmm.
passionate about. And if you
Brilliant.
really want to write, you will make the time for it. And then make sure you submit, because I've known so many that I have met over the years, either at writers' workshops or in writers' groups or through NaNoWriMo, and they'll tell me about their story, and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I want to read that story. I want you to write it. I want you to get it published, hopefully somewhere, and then I can read it because it sounds amazing. As a reader, I want to read it. And then they're too insecure about it. They don't believe in themselves enough. There'll
Mm-hmm.
always be errors in your writing, which can be improved with editing. And that's true. And you should edit and make sure it's the best it can be. But it doesn't have to be perfect, because if you get caught up in perfectionism, you will never submit. And if you don't submit your stories, you can never, ever get them published. Whereas if you get them to a good level that you're happy with and send them out, you'd be surprised. Because honestly, some of the best stories I've heard about never got submitted, and other people got in and got those publication slots. Do you know what I mean? So you have to
Yeah.
just be brave and just go for it.
No, that's brilliant advice. Yeah, I'm with you 100% there. Because like I've been there, like kind of thinking to myself, I had all these stories that I wrote for the kids, and I just decided to put them out there, like, and lo and behold, I self-published them, and it's still okay. So like, that's great advice. I really appreciate it, Grace.
Yeah, and I bet you're glad that you did it, because now that's
Yeah.
on your shelf and it's something brilliant for your kids
Mm,
and, finding readers. And you never look back from that point,
no,
because you realize that you actually can do it.
exactly. Yeah. No, that's great. Brilliant. And have you ever narrate your books as well? Have you ever kind of if that's the right word, narrate, like to kind of uh make an audio book of yeah.
No, I haven't, because there's a little bit of a cost to that. And
Okay.
as I said, zero marketing budget. So I
Yeah, true.
probably have to sell a few more paperbacks first before I get into
Yeah.
that. But then, and I would like to, because I do think it's a good idea. But what I'm probably going to try next is going for hardback editions, because they're reference books, and I actually think they would fit really well in libraries. They are
Mm,
available on things like BorrowBox and Libby for libraries to take. And I have one
great.
copy in a library in Washington, which is I'm very
Brilliant.
happy
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
because I didn't organize it. Somebody else found it for me and got it organized.
Great
But
stuff.
I'd love to get hardback, and they're now starting to do that with KDP, which is my print on demand publishers.
Saw that,
So I
yeah.
definitely want to try that. I think that would be really good. That's the
Mhm.
next step. Hardback first, maybe audiobook after that.
Brilliant. Yeah. And just sorry, I never asked you earlier on, where can people get your books as well, Grace? Just for
Oh
people who are
yes,
listening.
yes,
Yeah.
that's a good
Sorry.
point. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I've convinced them that it's a great read.
Yeah. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, that's absolutely fine. So they're available on all the different platforms on Amazon. The ebook is out on Kindle and on Kobo. Some people use Kobo. It's a very good platform, actually.
Yeah.
And they're available in hard copy, either signed copies directly from me, which they'll find from the blog, which is wordfoolery.wordpress.com,
Yeah.
and Academy Books in Southgate and Drogheda, if anybody's up that neck of the woods. It's my local independent bookshop are stocking the most recent one, which is The Words the Vikings Gave Us.
That's great. That's brilliant. Yeah. So that's checked out. I'm going to put all your information on the show notes for people to find. Anyway, you've kindly sent me all your links, so that's brilliant. So listen, that's brilliant, Grace. I really appreciate you coming on tonight.
And listen, I've had a great time. It's been really
Yeah.
nice to talk to you. It's
Yeah.
always great to talk to other writers anyway.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Brilliant. So that was Grace Tierney, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in today's podcast. Tune in next time for another author's podcast. So take care. Thanks again, Grace.
You're very welcome. Bye.
Take care. Thank you.